There we go.
That and that. Testing 1, 2. How does that sound? Can you hear me now? Even with Mr. Bushnell on the phone, I still have audio issues. So let's see. Doing a quick test. It says good. Mr. Bushnell, can you say hi to the group?
Hi, group. How are you?
I want to make sure we're going to hear Mr. Bushnell. All right. All right. All right. We are here. I am super excited. Super excited. So if you guys didn't know, we have Mr. Nolan Bushnell here on my stream, on my show. And I have to thank his son, Tyler, for setting this up. I had such a big beginning, extravaganza, Mr. Bushnell, set up for you, but that's okay. I just have so many things I want to ask you, and I don't want to take up a ton of your time, but there's some things I just wanted to talk to you. I know my fans out here are dying to get some information too, so I want to get right in on it, and I really do appreciate your time today.
My pleasure being here. Good fun.
So I know, again, I've been following you for a very long time. I actually have the 72, actually 75 home Pong console. It was my first Atari device. But I know when you were growing up, I know your father had passed away when you were quite young, and you became kind of the father of the household, and you had to do some work, and you still went to the University of Utah, correct, to get your electrical engineering degree?
Correct.
Right. So you did that, and then, if I'm not mistaken, you had a little fun and may have gambled away some funds you needed to pay for school at that point.
Always, I've always been sort of an edge player.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So, but because of that, you kind of got a summer job, right? You went to an amusement park, where back then, I want to make something clear to the younger people watching the show right now. So, video games that we know today didn't exist back then. There were pinball machines, yes, and there were electromechanical machines, right? Like little shooting games, stuff like that, right, Nolan?
Correct. And cranes, that sort of thing. And then there was just some things that were starting that were basically mechanical nightmares. And you could kind of look at them and you think they might be video games, but they were really just mechanical slide projectors. So there'd be a light and a piece of film, and they'd move the piece of film, and the piece of film would have a picture of a car on it, and then it projected onto a screen. And there was a game that was hugely successful called Chicago Speedway, and that was kind of the precursor to these mechanical games, and then video games took over, and nobody built those things before because you couldn't keep them running.
Right, and that was one of the things you did, right? You learned how to fix these as well. So you were managing, and you were also fixing these machines as well, correct?
Yeah, and what it really did is I knew the economics. I knew how much coin-operated games cost. I knew how much they had to make in order to be successful, and I've always said that was kind of my MBA for Atari.
Right, now there was something before Atari, it was Syzygy. I'm saying, is that the right way of saying it, Syzygy?
Syzygy, yeah. Last best in the dictionary.
Right. So you would, when you were in university, you obviously saw one of these machines. I'm going to pull this up right here. Was there PV1, correct? With computer
PV1.
Space. Right.
Yeah.
Playing computer space, and you saw that. And back then, other than tennis for two, like Pong, this was really the only real video game, and it was quite popular in universities. It was like what, a $500 computer system at the time?
A little more than $1 million, actually.
Oh, $1 million. Okay.
By the time you had it all, yeah, it was expensive. It was a big puppy. And you know,
okay, I'm sorry.
yes, yeah, I saw it, and then I was reminded of it at the Stanford AI project after I moved to California.
And then when you saw this, you obviously saw there was value in it, right? People were playing this. It was something very new. And one of the things that you do, which is why I'm such a fan of yours, I think a lot in the same way. We see things and try and find ways to make them a little more inexpensive to a degree, right? Because you're talking about a million plus, obviously, computer station. You wanted to make this something people could play in mass, which they couldn't do before. So that's when you came up with, and with Syzygy, you did the computer space. I'm gonna put this logo for a second, and you did this machine made out of fiberglass, right? It was a fiberglass machine.
Fiberglass, and you know, there was another thing that happened is that while I was working at Ampex, the cost of MSI chips went from $3 a piece to 25 cents a piece. And that was kind of the economic underpinnings that allowed all of a sudden these computer things to be built using MSI. And that was really the precursor of what was necessary for the video game.
So you did release this, and as funny as this is to everyone, again, some of the younger people may not know. There was really only four buttons, and your left and your right. You had thrust and you had fire. But this was something so new. Apparently, people had a hard time playing it.
Well, the game made a lot of money if it was adjacent to a college campus. It made no money at a working man's beer bar.
Because people got too many beers in them. That's why.
And well, yeah, it was really about, you know, it, in order to control the rocket, you had to retrofire. It used, you know, Newton's second law. Yeah, and and that's not intuitive unless you're a physics major.
I played it myself many years later, obviously, and I thought it was a very fun game. But it was basically a first forte, right? Syzygy came out with this machine. Uh, it did, I guess, okay by college campuses, but it wasn't like the big hit you were kind of hoping it would be, right? It wasn't
Yeah,
that big one. So we're going to jump forward a little bit and here, the next thing was really we came up with the Atari name, right? Because I guess someone else had the Syzygy name, which I found kind of strange. Someone had a name already with that.
yeah. It was a candle maker in Mendocino. It's kind of a hippie candle making company.
So you decided to change the name, and Atari means go in. Well, a
Check,
check,
sort of check in and go. Correct.
which is one of your favorite games, and you use the Fuji like logo. So that's where Atari kind of came from at that point. And you hired a gentleman by the name of Al Alcorn, right? He was an engineer, and you asked him to do something. I'll pull something here real quick. Here it is. Here's my machine. I'm trying to find this thing here now. Oh, Clem. I don't know where I put it. So I guess the idea for Pong, you had gone to a trade show and you had saw a prototype of the Magnavox Odyssey. And that's where you kind of saw the idea of tennis. Now I own a Magnavox Odyssey, got in 72. It was three family had gotten it. And it is a very basic game. There wasn't a lot to it. So you actually took again the idea and you brought it to the next level, and that's where we came up with this little guy.
Yep.
And
Correct.
again, if I'm not mistaken, one of the things that you tried to do with Atari back in the day had to be simple. There was only three instructions for the game. You still remember those
Yep.
three instructions?
Yeah. Insert ball or insert quarter. Ball will serve automatically. Avoid missing ball for high score.
And that's it. Now this was put in a bar. So you're talking about the space war, computer space didn't do well in bars. It was by college campuses. Now this was put in a bar, and you got a call a few days later, or even a day later, saying it was broken. And you went out to the bar to find out what happened. It wasn't broken at all, was it?
No, the coin box had totally filled up, so it wouldn't take any more quarters.
So you kind of knew at that point you may have had something.
No question about it. And we knew we could fix that. Just put on a bigger cash box.
So you did that, but now one of the big things, again, these video games, I'm going to come at that, were so new. It was kind of like the Wild West. Right? There wasn't really a way to protect what you had done. And obviously other manufacturers are cloning your machine in the arcade. There was really no way to really protect it at that point. It was so new, right?
It took about 4 years at that point in time to get a patent. And, you know, subsequently they shortened that. But at that time, you know, the business was all over before you could get a patent.
Right. And one of the things I know we'll talk about in a minute was you knew that these games, each one had a limited lifespan. You had to constantly innovate. And when we get to that a little bit later, we start talking about Time Warner, which I know was one of your big regrets. But we'll get there in a minute. So you had done that and started to come out with a consumer Pong. That was like your next thing you wanted to do. And I know Al kind of thought it was like impossible to cram everything you had in that arcade Pong into smaller Pong, but you persisted, right? You said this could be done.
Actually, he actually came to me and said that it could be done because he discovered N channel. So I really credit Al with that. I said I wanted to get it on, you know, there, but when he discovered N channel, he came into my office and he says, "Yeah, hey, I think we can do a consumer Pong now."
And that was the beginning of your project. But my understanding, you built it, you had gone to some trade shows, and no one wanted it.
Yeah, we took it to the toy show, and we sold 0. and then we found out the toy companies or toy retailers at that time didn't think they could sell anything that was more than $29.
And this was retailing for about what, $79?
Correct. Yep.
Which back then was about what, $3 I would say, probably like 19.
Probably.
20.
Yeah.
So,
but
good.
Then Sears Roebuck came to our rescue.
100,000 units. And then you kind of panicked, didn't you?
Oh yeah. But
now at that time, how many employees did you have at Atari at that time?
Probably 75. The coin-op business is doing pretty well. We're doing several million a year in coin-op.
Now, we're talking a minute ago, like you knew even then, you got to innovate in everything you did. You got to stay one step ahead of your competition. And there was a lot of competition back then when they showed something new. I know one of the next games you were working on was Breakout.
Yeah.
And when you were doing okay, sure.
It was actually the next one was Space Race, and then we did Quadra Pong and Tank. Actually, Breakout actually came a little bit later, and everybody thought the ball and paddle games were dead. You know, the engineers that did that was Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs.
Yep, we were going to talk about them too. I had them over here. Everything is all out of order where I did with it. So I did want to talk about that because I know Steve, there wouldn't be an Apple actually today, technically, if there wasn't an Atari, because Steve Jobs, if I recall correctly, kind of just walked into your offices. You know, he had a back then it was very hippie-ish. He apparently didn't bathe very much. He kind of had some BO. He walked in and said, "Listen, I'm not leaving until I get a job."
That's true.
That is true. So you gave him a job, but he ended up having to go to the night shift because people couldn't tolerate Steve at the time.
That's correct also. But he was good, and more than that, I knew that at night he would, the Wozniak would hang out, and Wozniak was a savant. He was not just good, he was great. And so I looked at it as getting two Steves for the price of one.
Right. So when you knew Steve Jobs, you met Wozniak through Steve.
Yeah.
And Steve was working at nights. I know he was doing a lot of things there, and he was very vocal, I guess, on how he thought things could be improved.
Correct.
So, if I remember watching a couple of documentaries that I saw and a couple books that I read, you knew that Steve knew Wozniak, and this was coming to Breakout. Breakout board design had a lot of chips, and back then, computer chips were very, very expensive back then. So you kind of tasked Steve Jobs to give him X amount of dollars for every amount of chips he could reduce in the breakout machine, because you kind of knew that he probably would bring Wozniak in, and Wozniak kind of really knew a lot more than he did as far as electronics.
Correct.
So you did that done, and my understanding is that you and the team were kind of blown away at how few amount of chips that Wozniak had actually reduced in your design.
Yep.
And then you obviously, I won't get too deep into this because obviously Steve Jobs is no longer alive. I don't want to do that, but you apparently got paid X amount of money and you kind of pocketed that. And Wozniak kind of found out like later that Steve had kind of not been fully forthcoming with what he was paid by Atari for the project.
Yeah.
A lot of years.
Wozniak got 500, and we've given Jobs 5,000.
So he just missed a zero there. There's an accident.
Yeah.
So he did that now again. So he had the two founders of Apple working at Atari, and then obviously Wozniak was a very intelligent man, and he created the Apple I, and they started up Apple. But they were kind of borrowing some stuff from, if I remember right, from Atari. They took chips here and there to kind of get their project going.
Well, actually, it was a thing where we allowed that. It was not a big deal, and I gave Steve a good deal on buying our microprocessors. We were buying them for like $8, where the retail price was 50, and the little thing, the modulator that allowed you to hook it to a TV, we supplied those to Apple.
So you supplied that stuff after Apple already kind of started with the early days of Apple?
In the early days of Apple, yeah.
So I know Steve had approached you at least on two occasions. Kind of, I think he was still getting ready for the home console business, and he came to it like the Apple I. You know, like we're concentrating on video games right now. Then you come back a second time, and one of your quotes was, I'll let you say the quote. You said something to the fact of when you start thinking about it, you want to cry.
Well, I could have had a third of Apple for $50,000, and I turned it down. And it was really because I didn't think Jobs would be a good CEO. And in some ways, like Back to the Future, you don't know what those decisions made, but because the guy that did put the money in was Mike Markler, who became the first president of Apple, and was truly a mentor to Steve and allowed him to kind of grow into the shoes of being a CEO.
I got to talk to you a little bit about Atari itself. So Atari was a very young company. You were young at the time. And you're out in California, and you're in the 70s. And if I'm not mistaken, Atari was one of the first companies to have a very relaxed business atmosphere.
Correct.
How to work, whatever you want to work these hours, you want to come in, as long as you put in your time, you didn't care what hours they work. You were very open to that, and obviously there were some parties, some very famous, partying going on at Atari as well.
No question about it. Well,
hot tub parties.
When you decide that you're going to be a total meritocracy, what that means is all the other stuff doesn't matter. What you wear, when you come to work, if you come to work. If you focus on getting the job done, that's all that counts. And so it basically allows you to treat everybody so that they can adapt to their own skill set or their own lifestyle. And I think that's liberating. And I think it works.
But I think a lot of your employees, they speak very highly of that, how you actually ran hard when you were CEO of the company.
Well, we always looked at the company as a joint project. Like we didn't, we didn't keep secrets. Everybody knew what everybody else was making, and there was difference. Some people got more money, and some people less. And people said, "Well, why doesn't everybody get the same?" I said, "Because some people are better than others." you know, we try to match the value of the company to the value of the employee. Real simple.
I agree with that as well. Now, another thing that I've been hearing over the years, and I don't know if I've ever got a real good answer to, when you're working on projects, like the VCS, right? You're definitely working in that for some time, had a code name of Stealth.
Correct.
Now, was that in fact a secretary's name at the company? Because I've heard stories that that's how you kind of did it. People secretaries got named after chips or machines.
It was actually the name of a bicycle one of the engineers had.
Really?
But it was funny. There was a story going around that it was a particular secretary that had very, very large breasts. And, but it was just, a folktale. It was actually a bicycle.
That's why I asked the question. That's what I want to know. So you're here first and foremost. Of all the times you heard there was one secretaries, the bicycle. That's what everyone knows. Now, another machine you were working on back in the early days was Touch Me.
Right.
No, not Touch Me. No, it wasn't that one. No, oh, God, where did it go? I do want to talk about Touch Me too. You had made, and it was Gotcha. Basically, I remember hearing stories about Joystick. And people were starting to feel like Joystick was more of a phallic symbol than anything else. So you were making an arcade game called Gotcha, where there were no joysticks, but there were two pink press kind of controllers. And I want to hear your opinion or story on that one.
Well, people thought they looked like boobs. But, it was just, we thought we'd try a shape of the controller that was somewhat different. It was actually kind of a failure. The game never did that well, and that was the last one that we ever did.
And I got just for a picture of it right here. So you actually changed that, I believe, two joysticks, correct? So you had it that way, and it was changed to joysticks after a while.
Yes.
So at least you were trying to innovate. And this particular game, it was maze, but the mazes actively changed as you were moving through the maze, right? So you couldn't see the path.
Well, when you're in a new industry, you always want to push the envelope a little bit because, a lot of times when innovation is about going into an abandoned hotel, and typically you go down and you check the room and there's a room, but sometimes there's a broom closet, but then sometimes there's a ballroom. And so what you really are doing is you want to try different things. And sometimes the weird thing will turn out to be dominant, will be more important than anything else.
I apologize, everyone. I'm kind of starstruck still. I'm talking to Nolan Bushnell. I can't believe I'm talking to this chat here. Another thing I did want to bring up was obviously the 2600. when that was coming out, it was comparably to what's out today, very primitive, very
Very.
basic machine. You had to basically program the ion gun into timing to draw everything on the screen. It only had 128 bytes, not megs, not K, byte of
Yeah.
workable space. And when it was designed, I think I heard that it was only designed for maybe 20 or 30 titles. That was like what that machine was going to be capable of before we went and tried to do something else. But actually, that became Atari's almost legacy from when it was released in 1977, which I still have my heavy sixer uh, here to this very day. I have like 5 or 20. But it pretty much was in production from 77 up until almost the 90s.
Right.
And that's just amazing. That was your baby. That was your project. That basically like your Apple Mac. Like Steve had the Apple and the Mac. That Stella was your project, and it almost actually bankrupted Target.
Well, not really. I mean, it didn't bankrupt us, but we needed cash to build the factory to build it. And we didn't have enough cash to really launch it properly. Uh, and so we were trying to take the company public just to get enough capital. And the market sort of had a hiccup. And so we thought maybe getting a corporate partner to put up the money. And we were introduced to Warner, and they decided they wanted to buy the whole company. And all of a sudden, they offered us enough, more money than I thought I'd ever get. And we sold it.
And that's what I hear is one of your big regrets. They bought it in what, like 70, 76 when Warner bought, and you were actually 78. So
76. Yeah.
76. And you were working under them, and there was a lot of conflict. Style that you had with your employees, the way you ran the company, and why people enjoyed working for Atari. I mean, back then, people really wanted to work for Atari. And there was one of those companies, it was one of the fastest growing companies at the time. I think it actually was the fastest growing company of that era. And
It was.
it was. And then Warner comes in, suits and ties, punch in at this time, leave at that time. It was a very different style. And I understand a lot of people, including yourself, had a hard time with it.
Absolutely. I mean, it was kind of East Coast mentality versus West Coast.
Those 5-minute warning.
What?
5-minute warning.
Okay.
So
Todd just gave me the 5-minute warning, so I apologize.
no worries, no worries. So the other thing I really wanted to touch on is really this. So you unfortunately did part the organization after you had your launch of the VCS. The VCS actually in 1980s, when Space Invaders had come out, kind of like blew up and became this really incredible console. But you had signed an NDA, which blocked you from pretty much the entire industry that you started. You basically started the whole gaming industry before you came out with these machines. It really wasn't anything. So how did that affect you after a while? 'Cause I know that's something you really enjoyed Atari. You never wanted to leave Atari, but you were kind of dealing with an organization you didn't want to deal with anymore. How did you deal with it?
Well, it was an easy transition because I had, in the interim, I'd actually started Chuck E. Cheese inside Atari.
Right.
And they agreed to sell me Atari for a really good deal. And we had one store and one restaurant. And so I just plunged my activities into Chuck E. Cheese. And I made more money on Chuck E. Cheese than I did on Ikari. So it wasn't all bad. Yeah.
And Chuck E. Cheese, again, is still here to this day, still around.
Correct.
And my son, I was there, and my son used to go there all the time. And I like the pizza. You know, that was very plain, but I didn't mind it.
Yep.
So I know you said you have to leave it in a minute or two. So is there, thinking back, just thinking back on the whole thing and seeing how Atari is still here today, it's like 54 years. It's the oldest video game company still in the world. It's still in existence. How do you feel? I guess now on the outside, looking back at this company that you started, is still around today. I mean, how do you feel about it personally?
Well, first of all, I think like your children, once you sell them, you keep interested in them, but you know, they make their own way in life. Like I'm very, very happy that the family I've gotten and the experiences, but I'm always focused on my new projects. And so now I'm gamifying education with a company called Exadexa. And I've got another company I'm spinning up called LabLore. And it's all about using games to educate. And looks like we're getting some good traction. And on paper, at least, I think actually LabLore might be my biggest success.
Well, I actually really hope you do have great success. Again, um, I am like many people in the chat know that I'm seeing this from the heart. I really appreciate you and everything you did. When I was growing up, I got my first Pong console. I got my first PCS. They have all the Atari consoles after the fact, but the 2600 and Pong um, are huge for me. They bring back such great memories, and it was a thing where at least back in the 70s, kids still went outside. When you had a snowy or rainy day, you went inside, you sat down with your friends, you played some combat, you played Indy 500, played these games, and they really, really mean a lot to us. And yes, it's a company. Atari
Yeah.
is a company. It is. But to me, it's more than that. It's really like me growing up, part of my history, part of my own legacy for that company. And it brought a lot of joy in my life, a lot of my friends' lives. So if we take anything away from the show other than my sound not working, which is pretty typical, take anything away from this, just know you made so many millions of people happy in the arcades and at home with the things that you have done. So always take that away that you made millions of people, whether you knew them or not, extremely happy. And I am ever grateful to you and your wife and family because I'm sure you work a lot of hours doing all this stuff. I just want to give my personal thanks from the community out to you, Nolan, that um, you are a special person in my life for the stuff you've done. Brought me a lot of joy. And I just really want to say I really appreciate that and you coming and spending some time with me today. You are basically my version of I don't know, eating, I don't know, Elon Musk or something along those lines. Not Kathleen Kennedy. Oh, I have to have one question before you go. One question to ask before you go. Do you like Star Wars?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What are your favorite three? What are your favorite three Star Wars films?
Well, I think that it's always fun to deal in alternative universes. And with that, I'm also a big fan of the Matrix. That whole concept of am I living in an alternative universe now? But VR gotten so good that I can't distinguish the difference between it and the other things. I'm also very fascinated with self-driving cars right now too.
Well, you actually
And
did
AI.
GPS back in the 70s as well. You had a GPS system. That blew me away that you did that.
Yeah, that was really on. We were keeping the database on audio tape for the maps. I mean,
there was no satellite.
Technology has moved so far. Yeah.
There was no satellite.
GPS. No, there were no GPS.
No.
They came 3 years later. Yeah. You just kind of make it up as you go along, and pretty soon, well, I've always said, if you want to, the best thing in life is to turn science fiction into reality.
At a good price point. At a good price point.
Yeah. Good
so I have to know, what were your favorite Star Wars films? It's very important. This is life or death.
My favorite sci-fi.
Star Wars. On the Star Wars films, there's a bunch of them. What are your favorite 3 Star Wars films?
I think the first because it was shocking, you know, and the rest was a film, a follow on, and that. But I think the first one is one of those things where you walk out of the theater with a, said, I just been gobsmacked.
It was, and it came out the same year as the Atari 2600. So let's put that into perspective. 1977 Star Wars, which he loves so much, is also the year that the Atari VCS came out. Both 2600 is a VCS. And Nolan, listen, I know you said you have to go. I don't want to hold you any longer, but I do want to thank you again for spending some time with me today. You basically were like my version of, Derek Jeter or some famous baseball player. That's who you are to me, and I'm gonna remember this quite some time.
Well, it's been fun meeting you, and we got to do it again sometime.
I'm always game. Next time we'll have a sound work.
Okay.
Nolan,
Be
thank you so
good.
much. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Say hi to Tyler and the family for me.
Will do.
Thank you, Nolan.
Bye now.
There we go. We actually just met Nolan Bushnell. We had some audio problems, which again is something I always have on my show. I had this whole big opening skit planned, and we started late, but and it threw me all off. I mean, to be honest, me meeting Nolan Bushnell is something that just blows my mind that happened. Um, we've had a lot of great guests on the show. I'm at 143, 145. I don't know anymore episodes of this show. Plus, we had the not kicking old school. We had Retro Buzz and Game Time, all those other shows, and we've met so many great people. But this is the gentleman who started the entire industry. There was nothing before Nolan Bushnell started. Now, yes, there was Ralph Baer with the Magnavox Odyssey. That was a whole very basic home system that, yes, they did do that. And there was also, I didn't get a chance to talk about it because everything that started so late, was the Fairchild Channel F, which came out right before the 2600 by a short amount. And this now has the title of the first cartridge-based system. And that's why the Atari VCS was called that. The Fairchild was originally called the Video Entertainment System, and the VCS was the Video Computer System. They were doing that at that point. Then once Fairchild got off the market, that's when the 2600 name came into place, and they started going that way. So I'm going to take a look at the chat right now. I know I was able to look at the chat before because I was just all over. So if there's anything in the chat that I missed, I didn't see if there's any super chats. I apologize for all of that. I'll try and go back and see if there was any, and grab it. But Nolan was having an issue. He was using a Mac, and the Mac was not allowing the audio to come through. We tried working for about 15 minutes. And I said, just call me on the phone, and we just did it on the phone. And I really appreciate so much Tyler and his time on this. And we got any chats coming through right here. It was. I mean, he's in California. Literally, I was up since 1 o'clock in the morning last night because I was worried about this show, about things going right. I set all this stuff up too. I had done all this stuff here, which I was going to try and show off, but I couldn't do it. I can find it over here now. Now I'd set this all up here. I wanted to show him. I built my own little Pong over there. Then I had set all this up over here. This is like 5% of my Atari stuff. And I got the Atari logos. I have my Lynxes and my Vader. I have my Pong unit out. I got my Jaguar. I have all this stuff over here, but we couldn't get the audio working. So all this stuff didn't even come to fruition tonight. That's kind of a bummer. But one of the big things that I heard since day one, that Stella, which was the code name for that 2600, was named after a very big breasted woman. And you heard tonight that's not the case. It was actually for a bicycle. It was just a bicycle. So I didn't get a chance to talk to you about that more about the hot tubs and all the partying that they did. But let's see here. I'm going to go in the chat here real quick. I do. I'm not joking. When I was little, when we first got Pong. It was my Uncle Nick. He had gotten Pong. And I was 6 years old. And we were playing Pong. And then my cousin had gotten an Atari. And then we gotten an Atari. And it's kind of like, I guess, what people are saying with Nintendo when kids are opening up. Getting an Atari back then was mind blowing. And it was about $250 at the time, which is close to $800 in today's money. My father, he was a truck driver, and he did what he could do to afford it. So it just blows my mind that me, nobody, was just talking to the creator of the video game industry, Nolan Bushnell, and couldn't get my mic working. So that's all that it is. Let's see what we got here. I didn't know how much time I was going to have with him. I still had so many questions here. I actually had a ton written down over here, but because I got so thrown off because of how late we were already, I didn't even look at what I wrote down. And then I was not looking here. It was just a mess. It's a typical show for me. I get excited, especially when I'm a huge fan of somebody. You know, and he's definitely an idol of mine. He's someone who had nothing. Guy had nothing, had a dream and had a vision, and he did it. And again, I also heard that Jobs and Wozniak were taking stuff without their knowledge to build these first Apples. And again, Nolan said that's not true. We sold it to them. We sold them at a good price. Atari was able to buy these in large quantities. So think about that for a second. The largest company in the world, Apple, all the billions and trillions of dollars that they're worth today, owe their roots to Atari and Nolan Bushnell. Now, Nolan Bushnell didn't invest in it, and that bought them. In fact, same thing here. In 1992, when Apple was about 3 weeks from going solvent, I could have bought Atari stock for the Jaguar, $2,000 worth, me and my father, or Apple. I'm like, fine, Jaguar stock. Yeah, well, that turned out. That money's gone. And if we invest that 2000 in Apple, I would probably be like him, pretty well off today. And it's also true, he developed a navigation system, a GPS system for cars, 3 years before first GPS satellites were in orbit. And it was using cassette tapes to do it. That blows my mind as well. So I didn't even get a chance to talk about his robots. He was very big into robots. And that's something I want to talk to him about as well. He invested a lot of different technologies. Some didn't pan out, some did. But maybe I can get a hold of him another time. Maybe on a Saturday show where it's not so late. Tim Cook should throw. He should. He should. They all should be thankful for, again, Atari, and that's a thing too. Atari is still around, and that's true. It is. It's not the same company it was, but Atari. I also didn't get a chance to talk to him about why is a new movie about Atari. They did with Tetris. There's a movie. Steve Jobs and Wozniak. There's a movie. Why was there a new movie about Nolan Bushnell and Atari? There's so many stories that intertwine with it. Like, did you know? I bet you guys didn't know this. That before the IBM PC came out, IBM was going to buy Atari for the 400, 800 computer division. In fact, they didn't end up doing that, but that was very close to happening before they decided to build the PC units. They probably would have been better off buying the Atari. It was still way more advanced, and it was more of a closed architecture that wasn't an open architecture that ended up killing IBM's computer business in the long run. They made a lot of money in the beginning, but then it kind of went down after that. So it's kind of a bummer. And I apologize to everyone here in the chat. I pictured how this was going to go so smooth, and I was going to nail these questions, be really professional, and we spent 20 minutes trying to get the sound to work. They were using a cell phone, but it worked. The cell phone actually worked, and it looked like I shot this. Turn this one off. Thank God for these little $5 microphones off of Amazon. Do we have sound now? There we go. Okay, again, what would my show be? You guys would know you're in the Matrix if I had no audio problems, because, well, then you would know it's not me. There's always some audio problems in my shows. So the microphone battery died. Hey, again, $7 over there. So who knows how long I was talking for before the microphone went out. And I'm drinking grape juice today. I was trying to be good today. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Hopefully, you can listen to that too. Yep, it should be audio. Hopefully it's audio now. And McCray 1-4 saying no audio, no audio. $5. Okay, that was like an hour ago. Oh my God, I was babbling on all that time, and there was no sound. I don't even know what I was saying anymore. I will say that I'm just so appreciative of Nolan. To me, he was basically, what do you say? It was long. Wow. Stop cheaping out cheap stuff. That's how I sell my stuff cheap. Because I buy stuff cheaply so I can pass those savings on to you guys. Hopefully I will get him back on again. If I do, I'll invest in a better microphone. But what I was just saying before is that, wait, did you guys hear anything about the Fairchild then? Did you hear anything about the Fairchild Channel F and the Magnavox Odyssey and the Simon? Did you hear anything during Simon? Or was Simon all dead air too? I think if Simon was whole dead air too. Simon says. Simon. So what I was saying before is I would bring that back up there again. So Atari had released an arcade called Touch Me. And Touch Me is, we got $9. Come on. With this, come on, Joel Skool, stay for the criticism. Love you, Glenn. I appreciate that. So saying thank you. Oh, yeah, the super chat from Tim. Down, I appreciate that. All right. Now I'm going to have to look at the microphone. Okay, I got a green light. There's a green light on there. So I was saying what the Touch Me was, Ralph Baer never really, I think, forgave Nolan from coming to see his Magnavox Odyssey and releasing, Pong in the arcade and then on 2600, and it just did so much better than the Magnavox Odyssey did. So when Atari made this Touch Me arcade machine, they also made a Touch Me home version. And basically it is Simon. So Ralph Baer saw these two and knew he could do it better, like Nolan Bushnell felt he could do better than Magnavox Odyssey. And he came out with Simon. And of course, Touch Me is a footnote in the industry where Simon, to this day, like Atari, after all these years, there's still Simon games on the shelf. Of course, there's different versions of it, but originally it was Atari Touch Me. And Ralph Baer kind of got his revenge for Pong with Simon. Now, I don't know if he made as much money as Pong did in the long run, but Simon, I've played both, and Simon is honestly a better way of playing the memory game. So hats off to, and rest in peace to Ralph Baer, also one of the grandfathers of gaming. And we shouldn't forget that. Now, I do say a lot that Nolan Bushnell is the grandfather and created the entire industry, but Ralph Baer was there too. And, sometimes, as we all know, being first doesn't always mean success. I mean, my YouTube channel's done 12 years, and there are people on here 6 months that blew past my 12,400, I think now. But I'm extremely appreciative of my people who are subscribed to the channel. But I'm doing this 12 years, and again, Metal Pixel started a little bit before I did. He's over 150,000. John Hancock started around the same time. He's over that. So I've come to the determination that between my audio channel, my audio problems, and everything else, hopefully my personality will win people over in that. But I had taken all these machines down here. I had taken all these machines down because I wanted them to see. Got to target out of here. I still have my original Pong. This is a Sears Telegames Pong machine playing here. You can see all the static on the TV set. So that's still working over there. My original Heavy Sixer Atari 2600. I have a couple Atari Lynxes up there. My Jaguar CD. And of course, Asteroids playing over here on my Viper. I have so much Atari stuff. And Jason, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And F you as well, my friend. I really appreciate the FU. To anyone who's new to the channel, the FU is for my full-size Build-A-Cade FU. It's not a curse. Unless you Arcade 1-Up, which case, yeah, then it's a curse. Outside of Arcade 1-Up, it is not a curse. Retro Eric, hi. Glenn, you did something none of the other YouTubers did. Get Nolan on your show. That's legendary. I did, and I just wish I did a little bit better. No, I really did, no joke, plan this thing out. But the whole beginning of the show, as usual, audio problems just didn't work out right. And I started the show. He wasn't even here. I was starting the show. He wasn't even in here yet. But I really appreciate it. He's such a genuine person. And his son, Tyler, who has the Poly-Cade. So Tyler, his son, has the Poly-Cade, and he's the one who he uses my parts, uses my controllers in his Poly-Cade. And I'm not, God, had to be, I can't tell how long it's been. Asked him if he could get his father on. I really would appreciate just talking to him for a few minutes, and he did that. So that was really wonderful. I got to make sure I thanked him. Maybe I'll send him a gift card, or maybe I'll send him an FU, a nice FU, not the other kind. And that, thanks, Jason. Thanks so much. So while we're still here talking a little bit, we're very close to the Kickstarter. We're just buttoning up a couple last details. I didn't want to show anything on tonight's show with the FU. We have some new pictures and stuff, but I didn't want to do it tonight with Nolan on the show, especially with Poly-Cade and his son. So next week we'll have an update, if not maybe even the Kickstarter being launched at that point. But and that's the thing too, you know, in the arcades, when I went to the arcades, Asteroids, Pong, Tempest, so many great Atari games that we played back in the day. You know, some games weren't there. Like Pole Position was actually Namco, but you know, but that's where I played it. And in Dig Dug, you could play Namco Dig Dug, or it could be Atari Dig Dug. So a lot of times you were growing up thinking these games were designed by Atari, when actually they licensed it from somebody else at the time. Paul, I really do. I appreciate that. Again, just the fact that I was talking to him. I'm talking to Nolan Bushnell is surreal enough to me as it was. That's a good question. That's a great question. God, it can't be one. There's a few. There's definitely a few. I can't pin it to one. So obviously, Target Fun was the very first game I played. I gotten the Sears Telegames Heavy Sixer. That's the first one I got. I sold that one off to buy my first computer. You had to do that back in the day. The Target Fun was definitely that. Surround, definitely Space Invaders, Asteroids, Freeway, and Laser Blast from Activision. Those were two games I really enjoyed. Laser Blast. I got a patch for Laser Blast, but man, I had so many games on that. My cousin, we would trade games all the time. But definitely, if I had to really pick one, if it had to be one, it would probably just have to be Space Invaders, just because that was such a good port. It's one of the few times where the 2600 port was superior. Now, it didn't look the same. It didn't look the same, but 112 game variations. You could play with friends, co-op, and everything like that. It was just such a great game. But now, years later, there are hacks that look like, you know, the arcade Space Invaders. So just incredible. And another fun fact, you know, back in, I want to say 1980, I actually worked as a kid. I was only 11. And I walked into a video store, and I was like Steve Jobs. I didn't leave. I said, give me a job. I didn't even say that. I want to help. So I was helping put the videotapes away, doing that stuff. And eventually they gave me like $10 for a day. I was like, oh my, $10. And I convinced them to put an arcade in the back. And I ran the arcade in the back at 11 years old. And that's why I purchased, I had the original Intellivision keyboard with the tape cassette built into it. And I sold that off of my Kawasaki 90. So a lot of great things and stupid things I sold off back in the day. But it was neat watching Atari representatives come in with a cartridge with these little ROMs, and they would put a ROM on the cartridge, and you put it in this machine, and you see Defender and Pac-Man, you know, well before they came out. And yes, that's what Atari did. They would send reps out to locations to showcase these games before they came out. Atari was huge back in the day. And again, it was the fastest growing company back then. And I also think it was the first to hit $1 billion. I didn't get a chance to ask him that, but I'm pretty sure it was the first to hit $1 billion as well. Atari 2600 and Commodore 64 made my early childhood. Now, that's awesome. For me, it was the 2600 and a TI 994A, although I really wanted the 400. But for some reason, I thought they worked. I thought a cartridge or a game from one machine worked on the next. I had no idea. It was only 11. And I think actually, yeah, it was 11 when I got it. And of course, I tried playing Atari games in it, and it didn't work. I was quite disappointed. But the TI 994A was a pretty special machine as well. There's so many awesome games for 2600. If I had to pick a quick favorite, it would be Cosmic Arc. That is actually a very good game. Very good game. Oh, Star Raiders. How did I forget Star Raiders? It was like almost a perfect port from the 8-bit line. And that's another question I wanted to ask him too. You know, I discussed it many times before that you had the 2600 come out, and then you had the 400, 800, then the 5200. But the 5200 was designed first, and they poached those chips into the 400, 800 computer. It was originally supposed to be in the 5200, and also the 5200 had better controllers that the Warner Brothers kind of like chinsed out on. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to ask as much as I wanted to do. He did, but he probably just saying that to be nice. He's like, I got to get off this show. This guy doesn't have good audio. We got to get out of here. But if he did mean to come back, I definitely would like to ask this other question. I was kind of hoping, honestly, I was hoping this would run like an hour and a half. I really did. I was hoping it was early for him. I would get him for at least an hour and a half. Maybe if I do it earlier in the day, maybe I get him a little bit longer. But he's got a lot of stuff on his plate as well. For him to give me any time at all, I'm very thankful that he did. 2600 to a VIC-20. A VIC-20 was very popular back in the day, and they had I think it was called Cosmic Avenger. It was a very good Space Invader clone. They did a really nice job with their Space Invaders. It looked exactly like it, played like it, did a real nice job. The only thing off was a little bit of the sounds. But other than that, it was really damn good. The TI-99 was, but you know what? It was also TI's fault. The TI-994A came out as the 4 in 1978. And it was a 16-bit computer. And all the technology in there eventually went into the 1982 ColecoVision, minus the CPU. They used a regular, I think it was a Z80 that they used in that. But that's how advanced the graphics was. The graphics and sound chip and the architecture in the TI was very advanced, but they effed it up by not having the 8-bit CPU ready, and they threw in the TMS-99 16-bit mini frame CPU in there, and it required so much glue logic and everything else. It just slowed. It was the slowest BASIC. It was the slowest with everything, unless you did it in assembly language. But even then, you really had to code it right. But it was very advanced for the time, and I definitely had some good time with the TI. But you could take any 8-bit computer, from the Coco to the 800s, all of them, especially the 400 and 800, because they had, like the Amiga, the graphics and sound chips were co-processors. So the CPU did less work, and the graphics chips. I mean, the 800 and 400 chipsets from 1979, designed in 78, okay, could best the Commodore 64, which came out in 82, 83. And the same thing with the SID chip and the Poké chip, hand in hand. But another thing to remember, the 2600, which came out in 1977, had 128 colors it could use. Most systems after that and before it were 4 colors, or maybe 8 or 16 max. The very primitive 2600 and the 400, 800 all could do 128 or 256 colors. Just like hand mode in the Amiga, we could do all 4096 colors. Yeah, and that's what gets me too. He's not even retired. He's starting other companies. He's still doing things. So hats off to him and his family. You know, they're, I don't know what I would say with him. He's got ideas and he's putting them to good use. And I take my hat off to him, because I know that I'll retire when I'm 6 feet under, although I'm going to be probably cremated, so I won't be even 6 feet under. But I'm going to work. I work at the hospital. You know, I enjoy working at the hospital, where I know what I'm doing makes a difference in other people's lives. And that's kind of like what kind of spills over to here with the products that I do, because I want to make people happy. I want people to enjoy spending time with family and friends. Sometimes I'm gullible, I guess, with that. I've had a lot of people take advantage of me, I suppose, because I always try and see the best. And I'm just an easygoing person. But you live and learn, right? I'm 56. I'm not going to change much. I have a big heart. I always put everything on my sleeve. I try and do the best for everyone. And some people take advantage of that. And that's just the way it is. And I do feel bad for Nolan, because I know that when he sold it to Warner Brothers and the way that went down, he regretted it. He very much regretted selling Atari to Warner. And think about it. If Nolan did stay at Atari, his motto was every 1 to 2 years, or 3, whatever it was going to be, you had to have new tech. And another thing people don't realize, Atari was a $1 billion company back then, and they had projects up the wazoo. I mean, like crazy projects. Like there's so many things I've meant to bring up with them, and I didn't get a chance to do it. There was also the Cosmos, and I can't find any of my things on here anymore. I was trying to get the audio working. I screwed everything up over here. I can't find half the stuff. But I put the logo back there. I don't know where it went. But there was this. Maybe if I got add it this way. Maybe go add a new one here. Okay, add an image. Add an image here. And browse. And where is it? This right here. So this was something Atari was working on. It was called the Cosmos. And this was a handheld Atari was coming out with. Atari spent a fortune buying all the IPs and all the patents for holograms. You can see in the center of the screen there is a hologram of a spaceship. So this was a handheld game that used holograms as the background. Now, the reason it didn't come out was the gameplay was just like the old Mattel football game, with just LEDs with a hologram in there. So it got boring too quick. But the point is, Atari was always doing innovating behind the scenes. They were developing graphic chips. Jeff Minter, who is the father of the 400 and 800 chipset, he left Atari because Warner Brothers was not letting him do his thing, where I'm sure Nolan would have been like, do it. The Amiga would have been the Atari Amiga. Think about that for a second. Just think about all the technology that Atari could have brought out if Nolan was still in charge. The guy had GPS working with no satellites. Think about that for a second. Think about that. GPS working without a satellite, running off a cassette tape. And you're right with this. Warner Brothers brought Atari down to, almost to bankruptcy, and they sold them off. And then Jack Tramiel bought it up. And now, was that a good or bad thing? I don't know. Jack did try to get the computer division going, and I think it did pretty well with the Jackintosh, the ST line. But again, when you compare the ST to the Amiga was still far superior to it. And not to take anything away from the ST line, but it's funny how the Atari ST is really a Commodore product, and the Commodore Amiga is really an Atari product. That deserves a movie. Between Steve Jobs, Commodore, Atari, IBM, all the stuff that happened behind the scenes, there has to be a movie here. And they were supposed to make one, 10 years ago, and it just never happened. It just never happened. And that's sad. And I hope I didn't miss, I think I probably missed a bunch in here of super chats. Just trying to scroll through real quick here. See if I didn't miss anything, because nothing's worse than putting a super chat in and not getting it called out. Wolf and Oz did do one up here. Hats off, Glenn. Great stuff. Deep respect to Nolan. And absolutely true. Absolute visionary. And you got to remember, back in 1970, 71, there was no electronic games at all. It was those mechanical games. And if you think pinball, is hard to keep working. Try and keep all those mechanical driving games or mechanical shooting games working. That had to be a lot of work to do. Well, I do apologize, guys, again, for all the damn audio problems, but I guess it's kind of you're watching the real GRS Glenn's Retro Show. If you have perfect audio, you're like, I'm not sure if that's Glenn's show or not. But I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm probably not going to be able to sleep well tonight. I had Nolan Bushnell on my show. I just wish that the show went better. It's one of those things where you had high hopes and it didn't work out. But listen, I really appreciate all you guys sticking around. I appreciate you guys, giving me positive vibes. I appreciate that. I hope you guys had a good week. More FU news will be coming shortly. All good, by the way. I'm very excited on how it's turning out. It's coming real soon. So listen, have a great weekend. Tell your family and friends that, yes, Glenn talked to Nolan, and yes, Glenn had audio problems again. But in between you making fun of me for that, just tell them, Glenn said, make sure I tell you I love you, because tomorrow's never promised. And just remember when we were kids, when everything was good, when you got home and there were cookies or something in the kitchen your mom just baked, or your father's going to take out to throw the baseball. That's what Atari is to me. Just bringing back those really good old memories. And I hope you guys have that with your family. And I hope you have that still tomorrow. I want to thank you guys for watching on the special edition of Glenn's Retro Show with Nolan Bushnell. I don't know how I'm going to have a top this one. This one's going to be a toughie. But I appreciate you guys. Have a great night. And game on, my friends.
Cartridges, hidden reset, 8-bit dreams, can't lose that bet. Floppy disks and arcade lights, Pac-Man, Frogger, we're playing all night. Simpsons in the background, neon in the air, 80s vibes, man, we didn't care. VHS tapes, staying up too late, Saturday cartoons, can't wait to escape. Dial-ups humming, we're hacking the code, was in upload mode. Atari, Commodore, pixels on screen. Living in the future was more than a dream. It's time to kick it old school, turn the clocks back, break the rules. When the pixels pop and the world was cool, we're taking it back, that's how we roll and roll. It's time to kick it old school, where the beats are fresh, the tech was gold. From arcades to TV shows that ruled, you know we're kicking it old school. MTV playing our favorite jams, moonwalking with MJ, Neon Slam, Ghostbusters, here we're ready to go. Chasing slasher scenes, fears in tow. Back to the future, hop in the DeLorean. Knight Rider cruising, man, there's no ignoring them. Battlestar Galactica, what a ride. Looney Tunes, antics, pure joy inside. Blockbusters ruled, we lined up for days. Video games booted up in the pixelated maze. Movie marathons and popcorn nights, we ruled the screen, living in the lights. It's time to kick it old school, turn the clocks back, break the rules. When the pixels pop and the world was cool, we're taking it back, that's how we roll, we roll. It's time to kick it old school, where the beats are fresh, the tech was gold. From arcades to TV shows that ruled, you know we're kicking it old school. Grab your joystick, the game's about to start. A high score world, now that's an art. We're cruising on hoverboards, living our dream. Old school forever, we're igniting the scene. It's time to kick it old school, turn the clocks back, break the rules. When the pixels pop and the world was cool, we're taking it back, that's how we roll, we roll. It's time to kick it old school.